Never before, and hopefully never again in our lifetimes, will there be a moment when the conversation about vaccination is more critical than it is today. While the current pandemic has definitely put a spotlight on the need for vaccines, it shouldn't take a pandemic for us to see that. My sophomore year at TCU, several cases of the mumps were reported. Cautionary emails from the Student Health Center quickly took over my inbox. We all know that college is stressful. Friends are new, classes are hard, professors are impossible, and time is always limited. We have a lot of things to worry about, but fighting off infectious diseases shouldn't be one of them. For students who hadn't been vaccinated, the fight against mumps became their top priority. Students were rushing to urgent care all over Fort Worth to get vaccinated because the vaccine clinic set up by TCU ran out of vaccines within the first hour of opening. Luckily, I had been vaccinated as a little kid against the mumps, so all I had to do was wash my hands a couple of extra times, and I could lock that extra stress in a box and focus on school. The mumps outbreak on my campus confused and frustrated me, and made me curious as to why people were not being vaccinated as a child. Today, I want to address those reasons people have for not being vaccinated and inform you all about the importance of immunizations and misconceptions that people have about vaccines. I'm going to first discuss the history and impact of vaccines, and then I will address common misconceptions that people have about immunizations. Edward Jenner founded the first vaccine in 1796 in response to the devastating effects of smallpox. He first vaccinated an 8-year-old boy and noticed that after months of being vaccinated, that 8-year-old boy demonstrated immunity to smallpox. Thanks to Jenner and global vaccination campaigns, in 1980, the World Health Organization announced one of humanity's biggest achievements, the complete eradication of smallpox, the most deadly disease in history. Since Jenner's experiments, common and horrible diseases can be prevented thanks to vaccines. According to Dr. Robert Field, chairman of the Department of Health Policy and Public Health in Philadelphia, vaccines have saved more lives than any other medical technology and have prevented untold amounts of human suffering. Even though vaccines have protected millions of people, there's a recent trend of refusing vaccines. I'm sure you have all heard of the anti-vax movement. Despite the immeasurable positive effects vaccines have had on public health, it remains a controversial topic. And a lot of this controversy stems from misconceptions about vaccines. So let's discuss some of these misconceptions. You have all probably heard about the idea that vaccines cause autism. But where does this idea come from? This association between vaccines and autism comes from the hypothesized effects of thimerosal, a mercury-based preservative once used in vaccines. Since 2001, thimerosal has no longer been used in vaccines, and since then there has not been any change in the occurrence of autism. However, the concern that there's a link between autism and vaccines remain. Others who do not think that thimerosal is the link believe that multiple vaccines given at a young age is the correlation between vaccines and autism. Autism starts to appear in young children at around the same time many recommended vaccines are given. Many parents and other skeptics of vaccines find this set of facts just too suggestive to ignore, even in the absence of actual scientific support of a causal connection. Even though there is no scientific evidence backing up the link between autism and vaccines, the concern remains widespread. Why? Well, the scientists and authors of the academic article, Knowing Less but Presuming More, argue that the psychological Dunning-Kruger effect explains these anti-vaccination attitudes. The Dunning-Kruger effect occurs when people think that they are smarter than they actually are. Social media gives everyone an opportunity to speak their minds and opinions even though they are wrong or misinformed. Concerned parents take everything into account when making decisions about their children, as they should, but the problem occurs when those parents believe that misinformation and act upon it. The authors conducted a survey for over 1,000 U.S. adults to test their knowledge about the causes of autism. According to the survey, More than a third of respondents in their sample thought they knew as much or more than doctors and scientists about the causes of autism. Now that we have addressed the most common misconception about the link between vaccines and autism, I want to discuss two other misconceptions. Even though vaccines have helped us forget about many devastating diseases, vaccine-preventable diseases have not completely gone away. Anti-vaxxers believe that we do not need to vaccinate for diseases that are not prevalent in our country. But even if some diseases are not prevalent in our country, it doesn't mean they aren't prevalent in other countries. Travel significantly helps the spread of diseases. And so we need vaccines to protect ourselves, others, and future generations. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, if we continue vaccinating now and vaccinating completely, parents in the future may be able to trust that some diseases of today will no longer be around to harm their children in the future. If there had never been a vaccine for smallpox, then smallpox would still be affecting us today. Everyone needs to be vaccinated in order to keep future generations safe and healthy. The last common misconception I want to speak about is the myth that the tetanus vaccine causes sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS. This hypothesized link between the tetanus shot and SIDS comes from a small proportion of children that died from SIDS after being recently vaccinated with the tetanus shot. However, many scientific studies conclude that the number of SIDS deaths happened by chance, meaning that the SIDS deaths would have occurred even if no vaccination had been given. Furthermore, many scientific studies conclude that children who have recently received the tetanus vaccine are actually less likely to get SIDS. Now, we can't go back in time and thank Jenner for creating the first vaccine, but we can partially make it up to him by continuing to use his revolutionary discovery to protect us all from terrifying infectious diseases. There are many misconceptions adding to the controversy surrounding the issue of vaccines. However, all of those misconceptions are just that, misconceptions. There is no scientific evidence to prove any of them true. The only evidence we have with regards to vaccines is that they are safe, effective, and necessary for the health of populations in the present and in the future. Never have vaccinations been more on people's minds than right now. We are all waiting for our lives to get back to normal, and that is all dependent on a vaccine.